The alarm screamed through the bridge of the UES Defiance as Admiral Sarah Chen watched her fleet die around her. Through the main view screen, she could see the burning hulks of human warships drifting in the cold darkness of space. Each flash of light marked another friend, another crew, another piece of humanity's last defense force being torn apart by enemy fire. "How many ships do we have left?" Chen asked her tactical officer. Lieutenant Morrison checked his console with shaking hands. 17 ships still fighting, Admiral. Down from 250. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. 250 ships against over 3,000 coalition vessels. It had been hopeless from the start, but they had to try. Earth was behind them, helpless and waiting. 3 billion humans lived on that blue world, and they were all that stood between them and the enemy. The coalition had been hunting humans for 10 years now. 12 different alien races had joined together to wipe out humanity. They called humans dangerous. They said humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too stubborn to be allowed to exist in their perfect galaxy. One by one, human colonies had fallen. One by one, human fleets had been destroyed. Now only Earth remained. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the Coalition flagship," the communications officer reported. "Put it through," Chen ordered. The view screen changed to show a tall, crystal-like being with glowing blue eyes. Admiral Zexthak of the Vextai species looked down at Chen with what might have been pity. "Human Admiral Chen." The alien's voice came through the speakers like breaking glass. "You have fought well, but this is over. Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick and painless." Chen stood up from her command chair. Blood ran down her forehead from where a piece of metal had cut her during the last attack. Her uniform was torn and dirty, but her eyes burned with defiance. "I have a counteroffer for you, Zexthak," she said calmly. "Go to hell." The alien's crystalline features showed no emotion. "So be it. You have chosen the hard way." The transmission ended. Around the Defiance, the Coalition fleet began moving forward again. Thousands of ships in perfect formation, their weapons charging with deadly light. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast on the fleet frequency. "We knew this day would come. We knew the odds when we took this fight, but we are human. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We fight until the end." The response came back from the remaining 17 ships. "Understood, Admiral." For Earth, for humanity. Chen looked at her crew. They were young, most of them. Too young to die in a war they had not started. But they stood at their posts with pride and determination. This was what the aliens did not understand about humans. When faced with certain death, humans did not run. They stood and fought. "All weapons, fire at will," Chen ordered. The human ships charged forward into the massive coalition fleet. Their weapons blazed with fury, punching holes through enemy shields and armor. The Defiance led the attack, its main guns firing continuously. Human ships were smaller than most alien vessels, but they were fast and deadly. The Coalition had expected an easy victory. They had expected the humans to break and run when they saw the size of the enemy fleet. Instead, the human ships fought like cornered wolves, using every trick and tactic they had learned in 10 years of war. Commander Hayes of the destroyer Lightning rammed his ship into a Coalition cruiser 3 times its size. The explosion lit up space like a small star. Captain Rodriguez of the frigate Thunderbolt used her ship's superior speed to dance between enemy vessels, her weapons carving through their formations. But there were too many enemies. For every Coalition ship the humans destroyed, 10 more took its place. One by one, the human vessels fell. The cruiser Independence died when enemy fire breached her reactor core. The battleship Freedom fought on with half her hull missing until she finally went silent. The destroyer Hope lasted only minutes before being overwhelmed by enemy fighters. Soon only 5 human ships remained. Then 3. Then just the Defiance and 2 escort vessels. "Admiral, we've lost the Courage," Morrison reported. "The Valor is heavily damaged and falling behind." Chen watched as the last escort ship exploded under concentrated enemy fire. Now only the Defiance remained, alone against 3,000 enemy vessels. "Damage report," she ordered. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Main reactor is losing power. Weapons are down to 30%. Life support is failing," Morrison read from his console. Chen nodded. She had known this moment would come. The Defiance was dying, but she would not go quietly. "Set course for the Coalition flagship," she ordered. Her crew looked at her in surprise. The navigation officer spoke up. "Admiral, that's a suicide run." "Yes, it is," Chen replied calmly. But we're going to make it count. Override the reactor safeties. Channel all remaining power to the engines. Understanding dawned on their faces. They were going to ram the enemy flagship. It would destroy the Defiance, but it might give Earth a few more hours before the invasion began. The wounded human battleship turned toward the massive coalition vessel. Enemy fire hammered its hull, tearing away armor and weapons. But the Defiance kept coming, her engines burning with the last of her power. Admiral, incoming transmission from Earth, the communications officer said. Put it through, Chen ordered. The face of President Martinez appeared on the screen. Behind him, Chen could see the chaos of the command center. Earth was preparing for invasion. Admiral Chen, we've been watching the battle. You and your fleet have made us proud. You've given us time to prepare. Thank you. Chen smiled sadly. Mr. President, it has been an honor to serve. Take care of each other down there. We will, Admiral. We will remember what you did here today. All of you. The transmission ended. The Defiance was now racing toward the coalition flagship at maximum speed. Enemy fighters swarmed around her, their weapons tearing at her hull. But nothing could stop her now. Open a channel to all coalition forces, Chen ordered. When the channel was open, she looked directly into the camera. Her face was bloody and her uniform was torn, but her voice was strong and clear. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy. We may fall here today, but we will never surrender. You think you have won by destroying our ships and killing our people, but you are wrong. The human spirit cannot be destroyed. Wherever humans live, wherever they remember, we will be there, and someday, somehow, we will have our revenge. Remember us. The Defiance struck the coalition flagship at full speed. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brilliant flash of light that marked the end of humanity's last fleet. In the silence that followed, coalition ships began moving toward Earth. The invasion would begin within hours. Admiral Zexthak looked at the burning wreckage of the human ship and felt something he had not expected. Not joy at victory, but a strange unease. The humans had fought like no other species he had ever encountered. Even facing certain death, they had refused to break. Their last message still echoed in his mind. Remember us, the human admiral had said. Zexthak had a feeling that remembering the humans might not be as easy as forgetting them. But the war was over now. Humanity was finished, or so he thought. Far away in the cold darkness at the edge of the solar system, something ancient began to stir. Something that had been sleeping for millions of years was starting to wake up, and it had heard the humans' final cry for help. 6 months had passed since the last human ship fell in the darkness of space. Earth was quiet now, its blue surface covered with the geometric structures of coalition research stations. The aliens had moved quickly after their victory, establishing bases to study what remained of human civilization. Dr. Kethrall of the Vexti species stood in what had once been the Louvre Museum in Paris. The crystal being's multiple eyes examined the human artworks with scientific interest. To him, these were simply artifacts of a dead species, no different from fossils or ancient pottery. Fascinating how such a primitive species created so many different forms of expression, he said to his assistant, an insect-like Kretok named Zixnar. The Kretok clicked his mandibles in agreement. Yes, Doctor. Though their violent nature shows in much of their art. Even their music speaks of war and conflict. Around them, coalition soldiers carefully packed human artifacts into storage containers. Everything would be cataloged and studied, then most of it would be destroyed. There was no point in keeping monuments to a dead civilization, but not all the coalition forces were on Earth. Far out in the cold reaches of the solar system, beyond the orbit of Pluto, automated human monitoring stations had detected something strange. Energy readings were coming from what appeared to be just another asteroid in the Kuiper Belt. Commander Velthar of the Coalition Deep Space Survey led a team of 12 scientists to investigate. Their ship, the Seeker of Truth, was small but equipped with the most advanced scanning equipment in the Coalition fleet. Are you certain the readings are accurate? Velthar asked his sensor operator. The young Nexari technician checked his instruments again. His blue-scaled hands moved quickly over the controls. Yes, Commander. The energy output is unlike anything we've seen before. It's coming from inside what appears to be a large asteroid. Velthar studied the object on the main screen. It looked like any other space rock, dark and lifeless. But his sensors told a different story. Deep inside that seemingly dead asteroid, Something was generating enormous amounts of power. Could it be some kind of human weapon? Asked Dr. Marix, the team's chief scientist. The elderly Zephni had been studying human technology for years. Impossible, Velthar replied. Humans never had technology this advanced. Their most powerful reactors produced barely a fraction of this energy output. As their ship moved closer to the asteroid, the energy readings grew stronger. Soon they could see that this was no ordinary space rock. Hidden beneath millions of years of accumulated dust and debris was something artificial. Something huge. Commander, I'm detecting metal structures beneath the surface, the sensor operator reported. The object appears to be hollow. No, wait, it's not hollow. It's a ship. The bridge fell silent. A ship buried in the Kuiper Belt, hidden for who knew how long. Velthar ordered his crew to begin careful excavation procedures. They used mining lasers to carefully remove the outer layers of rock and ice. What they found beneath took their breath away. The ship was enormous, easily 20 kilometers long. Its hull was made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered its surface, markings that looked almost like writing, but in no language any of them recognized. The design is completely unknown, Dr. Marix said as he studied the images. The technology appears to be far beyond anything in our databases. This ship is old, Commander. Very old. How old? Velthar asked. Preliminary scans suggest it has been here for at least 10 million years, possibly much longer. The crew exchanged glances. 10 million years ago, most of their species had barely learned to use fire. Whatever built this ship was ancient beyond imagination. As they worked to clear more of the vessel, they made another discovery. The ship's power systems were still active. Not only active, but running at what appeared to be normal operational levels. How is that possible? Velthar wondered aloud. No technology we know of could remain functional for that long. Dr. Marix was examining the symbols on the hull more closely. His computer was trying to match them against known languages and writing systems. Suddenly, he made a sound of surprise. Commander, you need to see this, he said. The computer has found partial matches for these symbols. What civilization? Velthar asked. Human. The bridge fell silent again. That was impossible. Humans had been a young species, barely a few thousand years old when they had first reached space. They couldn't possibly be connected to something this ancient. You must be mistaken, Velthar said. I ran the analysis 3 times, Dr. Marix replied. These symbols show clear similarities to ancient human writing systems, specifically something called Proto-Indo-European. It's like this ship was built by the ancestors of the humans we just destroyed. Velthar felt a chill run through his body. The humans they had fought had been stubborn and dangerous, but they were clearly a young species with primitive technology. The idea that they might be connected to the builders of this ancient vessel was disturbing. Begin detailed scans of the interior, he ordered. I want to know everything about this ship. As the scanning beams penetrated the hull, they revealed corridors and chambers of impossible complexity. The ship's interior was a maze of passages and rooms, some so large they could hold entire cities. And throughout it all, power flowed like blood through veins. The ship was not just functional. It was alive. Deep in the vessel's core, systems that had slept for millions of years began to respond to the scanning beams. Ancient processors started running diagnostic routines. Quantum networks that spanned dimensions began to activate. Something was waking up. On the bridge of the Seeker of Truth, the crew noticed the energy readings changing. The output was increasing slowly but steadily. Commander, the ship's power levels are rising, the sensor operator reported. Rising? How much? 15% increase in the last hour. And it's accelerating. Velthar felt that chill again. Whatever was inside that ancient vessel was responding to their presence. The thought that they might have awakened something that should have remained asleep crossed his mind. Maintain safe distance, he ordered. Continue scans, but do not attempt to board the vessel. But it was too late for caution. The scanning beams had already done their work. Deep inside the ship, in a chamber that existed in several dimensions at once, consciousness stirred. A mind that had slept for eons began to remember. It remembered a younger galaxy, when humans walked among the stars as gods. It remembered the great war against things from beyond reality. It remembered the decision to leave, to transcend physical existence and explore higher dimensions. And it remembered the promise to leave guardians behind. protectors who would watch over the children who would come after. The ancient consciousness reached out with senses that could perceive across time and space. It saw the coalition forces on Earth picking through the ruins of human civilization. It saw the burning wreckage of human ships floating in space. It understood what had happened. Its children had been murdered. The ship's hull began to glow faintly as more systems came online. The symbols on its surface pulsed with inner light, and in the deepest part of the vessel, something that was both machine and spirit began to feel an emotion it had not experienced for millions of years. Anger. Commander Velthar watched the energy readings climb higher and higher. His crew was growing nervous. Several had suggested they retreat to a safer distance. "Commander, should we return to base and report this?" Dr. Merrickx asked. Velthar considered it. The smart thing would be to leave now and let someone else deal with this mystery. But the scientist in him was fascinated. This was the discovery of a lifetime. "No," he said finally. "We stay and learn what we can. But prepare the ship for emergency departure." As they watched, the ancient vessel continued to awaken. Power flowed through circuits that had been dark since before their civilizations existed. And somewhere in its quantum heart, the Guardian prepared to fulfill its ancient duty. The humans were gone, but they would not be forgotten. And those who had destroyed them would learn that some debts could never be paid in full. The excavation work around the ancient ship had been going on for 3 weeks now. Commander Velthar's team had grown from 12 scientists to over 200, as word of the discovery spread through Coalition Command. Ships arrived daily, bringing experts from across the galaxy to study the mysterious vessel. Dr. Merrickx had set up a research station on the largest piece of cleared hull. His team worked around the clock trying to understand the symbols and technology they had found. The writing was definitely connected to human languages, but it was far more complex than anything modern humans had ever created. The mathematical formulas embedded in these symbols are incredible. Dr. Merrickx explained to Commander Velthar as they stood looking at the ship's hull. "They describe principles of physics that we're only beginning to understand. Whoever built this was thousands of years ahead of us technologically." Velthar nodded, but his attention was focused on the energy readings. The ship's power output had been steadily increasing for weeks. His crew was getting nervous, and he was beginning to share their concerns. "Any luck finding an entrance?" he asked. "We've located what appears to be an airlock, but it's sealed tight. The hull material is unlike anything we've ever seen. Our cutting tools barely scratched the surface." As they spoke, a young technician came running up to them. The Kretuk's wings buzzed with excitement. "Doctors, commanders, you need to see this. The ship. It's responding to our scans." They followed the technician to his workstation. On his screen, they could see energy patterns moving through the ship's structure like blood through veins. But more disturbing were the shapes moving in the corridors. "Are those figures?" Velthar asked. The technician adjusted his controls. The images became clearer. Humanoid shapes walked through the ship's passages. They wore what looked like ancient armor and carried weapons that glowed with inner light. "They appear to be some kind of holographic recordings," Dr. Merrickx said, "or possibly energy beings of some kind. They don't register on our life sign detectors." Velthar studied the figures on the screen. They moved with purpose, as if patrolling the ship's corridors. And there was something familiar about their appearance. "Run a biological comparison analysis," he ordered. The computer worked for several minutes, comparing the figures to known species in the Coalition database. When the results appeared, the team fell silent. Genetic match. 97% compatibility with baseline human DNA, the computer announced. Dr. Merrickx looked at the commander with wide eyes. "These are humans. Ancient humans, but definitely human." The implications were staggering. If this ship had been built by ancient humans, then the species they had just destroyed was far older and more advanced than anyone had imagined. The modern humans they had fought were apparently the descendants of a civilization that had once dominated the galaxy. "We need to get inside that ship," Velthar said, but the ship had other plans. Deep in its quantum core, the consciousness that called itself Captain Theron Valdris was fully awake now. He had been the commander of this vessel when it was first built, millions of years ago. Now he existed as both energy and memory, a fusion of technology and spirit that could never truly die. Valdris had been watching the alien excavation teams through the ship's sensors. He had listened to their conversations, learned their languages, and studied their intentions. They were scientists and explorers, not warriors. But they represented the coalition that had destroyed his descendants. The ancient captain's anger was cold and patient. He had learned much about these aliens in the weeks since his awakening. He knew about the war, about Earth's fall, about the humans who had died fighting for their survival. He knew about Admiral Chen's last stand and her final message. His children had called for help and he had been sleeping, but he was awake now. Valdris began to activate more of the ship's systems. Weapons that could bend space and time started their warm-up cycles. Shields that could deflect the heat of a star began to power up, and most importantly, the quantum communication array came online. The ship had been left as a guardian, but it was not alone. Across the galaxy, hidden in dead systems and forgotten corners of space, other guardians waited. Ships and stations and weapons platforms all sleeping until they were needed. Now they were needed. Valdris sent out the awakening signal on frequencies that no living species knew existed. The message was simple. The children are dead. The covenant is broken. Rise and remember your duty. One by one, across thousands of light years, ancient systems began to respond. Guardian ships buried in asteroid fields started to power up. Weapons platforms hidden in gas giants activated their targeting systems. Defense networks that had been dormant since the dawn of civilization came back online. The descendants of humanity's first great empire were waking up, and they were very, very angry. On the research station, Dr. Marix was the first to notice the change in the ship's behavior. The energy patterns were becoming more organized, more purposeful. It was as if the vessel was preparing for something. "Commander, I think we should consider pulling back to a safer distance," he said to Velthar. But before the commander could respond, something happened that changed everything. The sealed airlock they had been studying for weeks suddenly began to open. Ancient metal flowed like liquid, reshaping itself into a circular opening. Beyond the threshold, they could see a corridor filled with soft golden light. And standing in that corridor, as solid and real as any living being, was a figure in ancient armor. The being looked human, but there was something different about him. His eyes held the weight of millions of years, and power radiated from him like heat from a star. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am Captain Theron Valdris of the Guardian Fleet," he said in perfect coalition standard. "I have awakened to find my children dead and their killers celebrating. This will not stand." Commander Velthar tried to respond, but found that his voice would not work. The presence of this ancient being was overwhelming, like standing before a force of nature. "You will leave this place," Valdris continued. "You will return to your fleets and tell them that the Guardians have awakened. Tell them that the debt they owe for human blood will be paid in full." Dr. Marix finally found his voice. We were only studying your ship. We meant no harm." Valdris turned his ancient gaze on the scientist. "You meant no harm to the dead metal of a ship. But what harm did you mean to the living humans you helped destroy?" The accusation hung in the air like a physical weight. Dr. Marix had indeed helped analyze human technology during the war. His research had made coalition weapons more effective against human ships. "I was following orders," the doctor said weakly. "As were the humans who died following theirs," Valdris replied. "The difference is that they died defending their families. You lived helping to destroy them." The ancient captain raised his hand and energy crackled around his fingers, but then he lowered it again. "But you are merely tools," he said. "The fault lies with those who commanded you. They will face judgment. You will simply carry the message." Around them, the ship's hull began to glow brighter. Other systems were coming online now. Weapons and defenses that made coalition technology look like stone knives and bearskins. "Go," Valdris commanded. "Leave this place and do not return. The next time we meet, it will be in battle." Commander Velthar did not need to be told twice. He ordered an immediate evacuation of all personnel from the excavation site. Within hours, the coalition fleet was racing away from the ancient ship at maximum speed. Behind them, the Guardian vessel continued to awaken. Its hull shed the last of the accumulated debris, revealing the full glory of its construction. 20 kilometers of advanced technology, armed with weapons that could crack planets and defended by shields that could stop a supernova, and at its heart, Captain Valdris prepared for war. He had slept while his children died, but he would not sleep again until their deaths were avenged. The Guardian had awakened, and the galaxy would tremble. The news from the Kuiper Belt sent shockwaves through Coalition High Command. Emergency meetings were called on every homeworld as leaders tried to understand what they were facing. The ancient ship that had awakened was beyond their ability to comprehend, let alone fight. Admiral Zexthak stood before the Coalition War Council on the crystalline world of Vextai Prime. His report about the Guardian ship had been met with disbelief, then fear, then desperate planning for a defense that might be impossible. The energy readings from this vessel exceed our most powerful dreadnoughts by a factor of 10,000, he reported to the assembled leaders. Its technology appears to be based on principles of physics we do not understand. And according to our research teams, it was built by ancient humans. High Counselor Mektron of the Nexari species spoke first. His blue scales had paled to almost white with fear. Are you saying that the primitive humans we just defeated were descendants of the builders of this ship? That appears to be the case, Zexthak replied. Which means we may have made a terrible mistake. The insectoid Queen Vixara of the Kretok clicked her mandibles angrily. Mistake? They were violent and dangerous. The galaxy is safer without them. The galaxy may not be safer at all, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. Captain Theron Valdris walked into the council chamber as if he owned it. Coalition guards raised their weapons, but the ancient humans simply looked at them and their guns stopped working. The council members fell back in terror as the Guardian approached their central platform. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had faced death 1,000,000 times and found it lacking. You destroyed my children, Valdris said calmly. You burned their worlds, killed their families, and scattered their ashes to the void. Did you think there would be no consequences? High Counselor Mektron tried to speak with authority, but his voice shook. You are trespassing on sovereign coalition space. Leave now or face the consequences. Valdris smiled, and the expression was more terrifying than any snarl. Consequences? You speak to me of consequences? Let me show you what consequences look like. The ancient captain raised his hand, and suddenly the chamber's walls became transparent. Through them, the council could see space around Vextai Prime. What they saw made their blood turn to ice. Guardian ships surrounded their world. Not just one or two, but hundreds of them. Ancient vessels of impossible design hung in orbit like sleeping giants. Each one dwarfed the Coalition's largest battleships, and their hulls glowed with barely contained power. How? How is this possible? Admiral Zexthak whispered. We left Guardians throughout the galaxy, Valdris explained. Hidden bases, automated defense platforms, sleeping fleets. All waiting for the day when humanity's children might need protection. I have awakened them all. The Queen Vixara tried to maintain her composure. What do you want from us? Justice, Valdris replied simply. The humans you destroyed were innocent. They had committed no crime except existing in a galaxy you claimed as your own. For this, you killed billions of them. They were violent. Queen Vixara protested. They refused to accept peaceful integration into Coalition space. Valdris turned his ancient gaze on her. Peaceful integration? You demanded they abandon their independence, their culture, their very identity. When they refused, you named them dangerous and decided to exterminate them. Tell me, Queen, how is that different from what your ancestors did to the Velnari? The chamber fell silent. The Velnari had been a peaceful species that the Kretok had wiped out centuries ago during their own expansion. It was a dark chapter in their history that they preferred not to discuss. That was different, the Queen said weakly. No, Valdris said. It was exactly the same. You are predators who hunt in packs, justifying your murders with talk of galactic peace and order. But you have made one mistake. You chose the wrong prey. High Counselor Mektron tried a different approach. The humans are gone. Nothing can bring them back. What purpose does revenge serve now? Not all the humans are gone, Valdris replied. Hidden colonies survive in distant systems. Prison worlds hold thousands of human captives. Slave markets across Coalition space sell human children. I know where they all are, and I will free them all. Admiral Zexthak felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. What would it take for you to spare our worlds? Valdris considered the question. First, all human survivors will be released and given safe passage to worlds of their choosing. Second, reparations will be paid to rebuild human civilization. Third, those responsible for the genocide will face trial. Impossible, Queen Vixara said immediately. The Coalition would never agree to such terms. Then the Coalition will be destroyed, Valdris replied calmly. It makes no difference to me. I have waited millions of years for my children to call for help. I will not fail them now. The ancient captain walked to the center of the chamber and stood looking up at the assembled leaders. You have 72 hours to begin compliance. Release the human prisoners. Withdraw your occupation forces from Earth. Prepare the reparation payments. And if we refuse? High Counselor Mectran asked. Valdris smiled again. Then you will discover why the ancient humans were called the shepherds of the stars. You will learn what it means to face a species that conquered a galaxy when your ancestors were still living in caves. To demonstrate his point, Valdris gestured toward the viewing walls. In space around Vexti Prime, one of the Guardian ships fired a single weapon. The beam of energy reached out across space and touched a dead moon in a distant orbit. The moon simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not shattered, but erased from reality as if it had never been. The weapon had manipulated probability itself, reducing the chance of the moon's existence to zero. The council members stared in horror at the empty space where the moon had been moments before. This was beyond anything they had imagined possible. That was a demonstration, Valdris said. The next target will not be uninhabited. With that, the ancient captain simply faded away like a ghost, leaving the terrified leaders alone with their impossible choice. Across Coalition space, other demonstrations were taking place. Guardian ships appeared over major military installations and erased entire asteroid bases with single shots. Ancient weapons platforms emerged from gas giants and disabled Coalition fleets without firing a shot. Simply by existing in the same space as them, on Earth, Coalition occupation forces watched in terror as their equipment began failing for no apparent reason. Weapons stopped working, ships refused to start, and communication systems went silent. The ancient Guardians were not just powerful. They could reach across space and disable technology with a thought. In the hidden human colonies scattered across the galaxy, people looked up at the stars and saw salvation arriving. Guardian ships appeared in their skies, broadcasting a message that brought tears to human eyes. Children of Earth, this is Captain Theron Valdris of the Guardian Fleet. We have heard your call. We have seen your suffering. The long night is over. Your ancestors have returned to set things right. But for the Coalition, the nightmare was just beginning. They had awakened something that should have stayed sleeping, and now they would pay the price for their genocide. The ancient humans had built an empire that spanned the galaxy once before. Now their descendants would do it again, and this time they would not be merciful to those who stood in their way. The war for humanity's future had begun, and the Coalition was about to learn what it truly meant to face the wrath of awakened gods. The 72-hour deadline came and went without response from Coalition High Command. Captain Theron Valdris had expected as much. Species like the Coalition members rarely changed their ways without being forced to do so. They would need to learn through pain what they had refused, to accept through wisdom. The reckoning began at dawn on Kretok Prime. Queen Vixara was in her throne chamber when the ancient guardian appeared before her. She had surrounded herself with her strongest warriors, but they might as well have been children with toys for all the good they did against Valdris. Your time is up, Queen, the ancient captain said. You chose war over justice. Now face the consequences of that choice. The Queen raised herself to her full height, trying to project strength she did not feel. You are one being against an empire of trillions. You cannot win. Valdris gestured toward the chamber's viewing window. Outside, the Queen could see her world's mighty defense fleet. Thousands of ships hung in space around the planet, the most powerful military force the Kretok had ever assembled. As she watched, the ships simply stopped existing. One moment they were there, and the next they were gone. Not destroyed or damaged, but erased from reality as if they had never been built. Your empire is built on the bones of those you have conquered, Valdris said. The Velnari, the Mortaki, the Zephni colonies you destroyed before they could join the Coalition. Did you think no one was keeping track of your crimes? The Queen's warriors raised their weapons, but Valdris simply looked at them and they found themselves frozen in place. They could not move, could not speak, could only watch as their Queen faced judgment. I offer you the same choice you gave the humans, Valdris continued. Surrender and accept justice or be destroyed. What is your answer? Queen Vixara tried to speak defiantly, but the words would not come. She had seen what this ancient being could do. Her mighty fleet was gone. Her world was defenseless. And somewhere in her primitive brain, The part that had once feared predators in the dark, she understood that she was facing something far beyond her ability to fight. I surrender, she whispered. Valdris nodded. Then you will face trial for genocide. Your people will make reparations to every species you have wronged, and your military will be disbanded. Similar scenes played out across Coalition space. On Vexti Prime, Admiral Zexthak found his crystalline structure beginning to crack under the pressure of Valdris's mere presence. The proud Vexti leader, who had believed his species superior to all others, broke down and begged for mercy. On Nexari homeworld, High Counselor Mektron tried to flee in his personal ship, only to find himself transported back to his office every time he tried to leave. There was no escape from the ancient Guardian's justice, but Valdris was not simply destroying the Coalition. He was judging each individual based on their actions during the human genocide. Those who had shown mercy to human prisoners found themselves protected and transported to safe worlds. Those who had committed atrocities faced fates worse than death. General Korthax of the Zephni had personally overseen the destruction of the human colony on New Terra. He had ordered his troops to kill every man, woman, and child on the planet. Now he found himself trapped in a temporal loop, forced to experience the final moments of every human he had killed, over and over again for eternity. Commander Velthos had led bombing runs against human refugee ships, targeting civilian transports fleeing the war zones. He was exiled to a pocket dimension, where he faced the accumulated fury of every human he had helped murder, their ghosts pursuing him through an endless nightmare. But for every monster who faced judgment, there were others who received mercy. Captain Rexani of the Mortaki had secretly helped human prisoners escape from Coalition detention centers. She found herself transported to a beautiful world where she could live in peace for the rest of her days. Dr. Kethral, who had studied human art with genuine respect rather than contempt, was spared and even invited to help preserve human culture in the new order that was coming. As the judgment continued, Valdris turned his attention to the human survivors scattered across the galaxy. Guardian ships appeared over prison worlds and slave markets, their crews walking through force fields and locked doors as if they did not exist. On the slave world of Carexa 7, thousands of human children had been working in the mines for years. Coalition guards tried to stop the ancient soldiers who came to free them, but their weapons simply would not function. The Guardians walked among the children like protective spirits, healing their wounds and carrying them to safety. "Who are you?" asked a young girl named Sarah, no more than 10 years old. She had been taken from her family when the Coalition conquered her homeworld. The Guardian who carried her looked down with eyes that held the warmth of a grandfather and the strength of a warrior. "We are your ancestors, little one. We are the humans who came before, and we have come to take you home." Similar rescues took place across Coalition space. Hidden colonies that had survived the genocide were revealed and protected. Human prisoners were freed from detention centers and prison worlds. Families separated by war were reunited. On Earth itself, the Coalition occupation forces simply vanished one day. They did not leave or retreat. They were simply transported elsewhere, their equipment left behind. In their place came new Guardians, ancient humans who began the work of healing the wounded world. The survivors who remained on Earth wept as they saw their rescuers. These beings looked human, but they moved with a grace and power that spoke of evolution beyond anything the modern species had achieved. They were what humanity might become, given time and wisdom. Captain Valdris appeared in the ruins of what had once been New York City. Around him the survivors gathered, drawn by hope they had not felt in months. He looked at them with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of eternity. "Children of Earth," he said, "the long night is over. Your ancestors have returned to set things right. We failed to protect you when you needed us most, but we will not fail you again." An elderly man stepped forward from the crowd. His hair was white and his back was bent with age, but his eyes still held the fire that had made humans feared across the galaxy. "Are you really human?" he asked. "Are you really our ancestors?" Valdris smiled, and for a moment he looked less like an ancient god and more like a proud father. "We are what you will become in time. We are humanity's first empire, the shepherds of stars who learned to transcend death itself. We left this galaxy long ago to explore higher dimensions, but we left guardians behind to protect our children." "Why did you wait so long?" another survivor asked. Why didn't you help us during the war? The ancient captain's expression grew sad. We were sleeping, lost in dreams of distant realms. By the time we heard your call for help, it was almost too late. But never again. From this day forward, humanity will never stand alone. As the weeks passed, a new order began to emerge from the ashes of the coalition. The ancient guardians worked tirelessly to rebuild human civilization, but they also began the greater task of teaching their descendants. Schools were established where human children learned not just science and mathematics, but the deeper truths about their heritage. They learned that they were part of a species that had once ruled the galaxy with wisdom and strength. They learned that the same potential that had driven their ancestors to transcend physical existence still flowed in their blood. The other species of the former coalition were not destroyed, but they were changed. Those who had shown mercy during the war were allowed to keep their worlds and rebuild their societies. Those who had committed atrocities faced judgment that was both terrible and perfectly just. And in the depths of space, other guardians continued to awaken. Ancient ships and stations that had slept for millions of years came back online, ready to protect humanity's children as they grew into their true destiny. Captain Theron Valdris stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars that had once belonged to his people. Soon they would belong to humanity again, but this time the rule would be different. This time it would be guided by wisdom, learned through suffering and tempered by mercy earned through struggle. The last human warship had fallen, but from its ashes had risen something far greater. The ancient guardians had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. In time, the children would grow to become like their ancestors. They would learn to walk between dimensions and speak to the very atoms of creation. They would become the shepherds of stars once again, but they would never forget the lesson learned in blood and fire, that power without compassion was tyranny, and that the greatest strength came not from domination, but from protection of those who could not protect themselves. The human spirit, which had refused to break even in the face of extinction, would carry that lesson to the stars and beyond. The ancient superwarship had awakened, and with it, the true destiny of humanity.